Talia's hands trembled, slick with a nervous sweat, as she leaned against the cool, polished surface of the mahogany door. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat she was certain echoed through the opulent halls of the mansion. Through the sliver of an opening, she witnessed a scene that sent a jolt of icy dread through her veins. Julian Ferrara, a name whispered with fear and reverence throughout New York City, the man whose shadow held the promise of both immense power and chilling violence, was collapsing. He crumpled to his knees, clutching at his chest, his face contorted in a mask of agony. Standing over him, a figure of icy elegance, was his wife, Victoria. In her hand, she held an empty crystal glass, its facets catching the light like shards of malevolent laughter. Her red lips, usually painted with a seductive allure, were now curved into a smile so chilling, so devoid of warmth, that it froze the very blood in Talia's veins. "You should have signed the papers when I asked nicely," Victoria purred, her voice a silken whisper that belied the deadly intent behind it. The click of her expensive heels echoed as she circled his weakening form, a predator toying with its prey. Talia knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her bones, that she should flee. She should turn and run, pretending she had never left her small, unassuming quarters. Pretend she hadn't come to return the forgotten silver tray. But as Julian's face turned an ashen gray, as his breathing grew ragged and shallow, something inside her, a force she couldn't define, a flicker of empathy she couldn't extinguish, refused to let her turn away. The decision she made in the next 3 seconds, she instinctively knew, would irrevocably alter the course of her life. It would either save her or end her. What she couldn't possibly fathom was that it would change absolutely everything. Would Talia risk everything, her job, her safety, perhaps even her life, to save the man who held an entire city in his terrifying grip? What secret was Victoria hiding? A secret so explosive it could shatter empires and destroy them all. Talia Brooks had learned 3 essential rules during her 6 months working at the Ferrara mansion. Rules ingrained in her very being. Keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and never, under any circumstances, venture into the West Wing after 10 p.m. Yet here she stood, at 10:47, silver tray clutched in her sweaty palm, because Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, had insisted someone return it before the morning inventory. Such was the way of things in this place. Seemingly important things with little actual importance. The mansion sprawled like a formidable fortress in the heart of Manhattan's Upper East Side, a monument to obscene wealth and ruthless ambition. Marble columns soared, imported chandeliers dripped with crystals that shimmered like captured starlight, each fixture likely costing more than Talia's entire childhood home in Brooklyn. She moved through the dimly lit corridors, her worn sneakers silent against the plush Persian rugs that probably represented 6 months' worth of her meager salary. Talia caught her reflection in a gilded mirror, the antique surface reflecting her own image back at her. Deep brown skin that glowed like warm amber in the low light, natural curls pulled back into a neat, practical bun. Eyes that her mama always said were too honest, too revealing for their own good. At 26, she was juggling 3 jobs, barely scraping by, but this one, the Ferrara mansion, paid the most. Enough, finally, to afford her little brother's college textbooks, and keep the lights on in their cramped apartment. A space she was increasingly finding hard to call home. She was almost to the kitchen, the imagined scent of stale coffee and lemon cleaner guiding her, when she heard it. A sound that shattered the oppressive silence. A sound that felt profoundly wrong. Glass shattering with violent finality. A heavy thud that resonated through the walls, followed by a silence so complete, so absolute. It was more terrifying than any scream. Talia froze. Every survival instinct screamed at her to walk away, to ignore the sound, to mind her own business, as she had done her whole life. Stay invisible. It was the only way to survive. But the West Wing doors were slightly ajar, spilling a wedge of warm, inviting light into the hallway, and she could hear labored breathing, a desperate, rasping sound that tugged at something deep inside her. She shouldn't. She really, really shouldn't. Her feet moved anyway, Through the crack in the door, Talia saw Julian Ferrara on his knees. She had only glimpsed him a handful of times in passing, a fleeting impression of power and danger. A tall, devastatingly handsome man in his mid-30s, with dark, slicked-back hair, sharp, almost predatory Italian features, and eyes that were rumored to be able to cut through steel. The kind of man who made grown men stammer and enemies disappear. But right now he looked vulnerable, diminished. His hands clawed at his chest, his face contorted in agony, as his wife, Victoria, towered over him. Victoria Ferrara was everything Talia wasn't. Blonde, polished, impeccably dressed, dripping in diamonds that caught the light and scattered it like icy stars. And she was smiling, cold, cruel smile. "The poison won't kill you immediately," Victoria said casually, examining her perfectly manicured nails with disinterest. "But by morning they'll find you dead in your study. Heart attack. So tragic. So convenient." Talia's breath caught in her throat, a strangled gasp she prayed Victoria hadn't heard. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. She should call the police. But everyone knew the police didn't touch Julian Ferrara. He was untouchable. She should run, save herself, get as far away from this madness as possible. But Julian's eyes were closing, his massive frame swaying precariously. He was going to fall. Before she could overthink it, before the fear could paralyze her completely, Talia burst through the door. "Step away from him." Her voice came out stronger, more resolute than she felt. Victoria whirled around, shock flickering across her flawless features before settling into cold, murderous fury. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's calling an ambulance." Talia's hands shook violently as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick against the smooth surface. "You stupid little maid." Victoria's voice dripped with venom, each word a poisoned dart. "You have no idea what you've just done." But Talia was already kneeling beside Julian, her fingers searching for a pulse. It was weak, thready, but present. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and she saw something there, in the depths of his pain-filled gaze, that surprised her. Recognition, and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. "Don't speak," Talia whispered, her fingers gentle on his wrist. "Save your strength." The next few minutes blurred into chaos. Victoria lunged for her phone, trying to smash it against the floor, but Talia was faster, dodging around the expensive leather sofa with surprising agility. Julian, summoning a reserve of strength she couldn't have imagined he possessed, managed to reach into his jacket, his fingers fumbling for his own phone. With trembling fingers, he pressed a single button. Within 3 minutes, the mansion was flooded with men in black suits. Imposing, silent figures with a predatory air about them. Within 5, Victoria was being dragged away, screaming threats that made Talia's blood run cold. Promises of pain and retribution. Within 10, paramedics were loading Julian onto a stretcher, his face ashen. And a man with cold, calculating eyes and an impossibly expensive suit was firing questions at Talia. Questions she barely comprehended. "You saved his life," the man said, his voice devoid of emotion. "My name is Marco. I'm Julian's right hand." He paused, his gaze assessing her with unnerving intensity. "That makes you either very brave or very stupid." "Just human," Talia whispered, watching as they carried Julian away, his face obscured by an oxygen mask. Marco studied her with unsettling intensity, his gaze lingering on her face, her hands, as if trying to decipher her motives. "Mr. Ferrara will want to speak with you. You'll stay here tonight, for your protection." "Protection from what?" His lips barely moved as he spoke. "From everyone who'll want you dead, once they learn you witnessed this." The words hit her like ice water, a chilling premonition of the danger she had unwittingly stepped into. Talia thought of her small, cluttered apartment, her brother, her simple, uncomplicated life that suddenly felt impossibly far away. "I just wanted to return a tray," she said softly, the words sounding absurdly inadequate in the face of everything that had transpired. Marco's expression softened, just a fraction. It might have been sympathy, or simply a professional acknowledgement of the situation. That tray just saved the most dangerous man in New York. Nothing about your life will ever be simple again. As they led her to a guest room, not her tiny servant's quarters, but an actual guest room, a lavishly appointed space with a king-sized bed and windows overlooking the glittering cityscape, Talia realized the undeniable truth in his words. She had crossed an invisible line, stepped into a world she didn't understand, a world of power, violence, and unimaginable stakes. Through the window, the city glittered with both promises and threats. Somewhere out there, Victoria Ferrara's family would be plotting revenge, their vast resources and ruthless connections already mobilized. Somewhere closer, Julian Ferrara lay in a hospital bed, alive only because Talia couldn't walk away. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her reflection staring back at her. A stranger in a gilded cage. What have I done? Her phone buzzed, the sudden vibration making her jump. A text from an unknown number. Thank you. JF star. Talia's heart stuttered in her chest. Even from a hospital bed, poisoned and weak, Julian Ferrara was watching over her. And somehow that terrified her more than anything else. Talia Brooks had just become the sole witness to an attempted murder, and the only person standing between Julian Ferrara and death. But saving the Mafia boss came with a price she never imagined. What lengths would Julian go to in order to protect her? Talia didn't sleep. How could she? She sat on the edge of the impossibly soft bed, still wearing her maid's uniform, the starched fabric feeling alien against her skin, watching the sunrise paint the Manhattan skyline in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful and brutal, just like everything else in this world she'd stumbled into. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing, a constant stream of worried messages. Her brother, Marcus. Where are you? Mrs. Chun. Mr. Marco said you're taking a few days off. Is everything all right, Talia? Her best friend, Kesha. Girl. Call me. What's going on? She couldn't explain. She didn't even know where to start. At 7 a.m. there was a soft knock at the door. A woman entered, not a maid, but someone official-looking, with kind eyes and a calming demeanor. Miss Brooks, I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. Mr. Ferrara has requested I check on you. I'm fine, Talia said automatically, the ingrained habit of minimizing her own needs kicking in. Dr. Chun raised an eyebrow. You witnessed an attempted murder and spent the night in a crime scene. You're not fine. She paused, her gaze gentle but firm. Tell me how you're really feeling. And somehow, to her own surprise, Talia found herself talking, pouring out the fear, the shock, the way her hands wouldn't stop shaking, the gnawing anxiety that threatened to consume her. Dr. Chun listened without judgment, occasionally making notes, her presence a soothing balm in the midst of the chaos. When she was done, she left Talia with a card and a prescription for anxiety medication, if she needed it. You did something incredibly brave, Dr. Chun said at the door. But bravery doesn't mean you don't get to feel scared. After she left, Marco appeared, his expression unreadable. In daylight he looked less intimidating, more tired actually, with dark shadows under his eyes. Mr. Ferrara is being discharged this afternoon. He wants to see you. Is he okay? He will be, thanks to you. Marco's expression softened slightly, a flicker of something that might have been gratitude. We found what Victoria gave him. A rare poison, slow acting. If you hadn't intervened... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. What happens now? Now you become our most important asset. Victoria's family will want you silenced. Her lawyer will claim you're lying, that you saw nothing. You'll need protection. Talia's stomach dropped. For how long? As long as it takes. Marco paused, his gaze unwavering. Mr. Ferrara is prepared to compensate you generously. A new apartment, security, anything you need. But you can't go back to your old life. Not yet. The words felt like a prison sentence wrapped in luxury. Talia thought of Marcus, of her simple routines, of the freedom to walk down the street without constantly looking over her shoulder. I don't want his money, she said quietly. I just want to be safe. In this world, Miss Brooks, money and safety are the same thing. They brought her to see Julian at 3 p.m. The hospital's penthouse floor had been locked down. Guards stood at every entrance, their faces impassive. Talia's heart pounded against her ribs as Marco led her through sterile corridors that smelled of antiseptic and expensive flowers. Julian Ferrara sat in a leather chair by the window, already dressed in a tailored black suit, despite the 4 still attached to his arm. He looked like death warmed over, pale, exhausted, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Leave us," he said to Marco, his voice a low rumble that brooked no argument. "Boss, she saved your life. I think I'm safe here." Julian's gaze didn't waver. "Leave us, Marco." When they were alone, Julian gestured to the chair across from him. Talia sat, acutely aware of every detail. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the purple shadows under his eyes, the raw vulnerability he was trying to hide beneath his commanding presence. "You should have walked away," he said finally, his voice rough. "Probably. Why didn't you?" Talia met his gaze, holding it steady. "Because nobody deserves to die like that. Not even you." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Respect. "Not even me," he repeated softly. "You know who I am, what I do. I know what people say. They're not wrong." His voice was rough, tired. "I've done terrible things, Talia Brooks. I'm not a good man." "Then why did your wife want you dead?" The question hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Julian's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with a sigh, he relented. "Because I wanted out. I was planning to dismantle everything, go legitimate, and that meant cutting ties with her family's operation. They couldn't allow that. So she tried to kill you. Victoria never loved me. It was always about power, money, connections." He leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "What she didn't know is that I've been documenting everything. Every deal, every transaction. Evidence that will destroy her family's empire. She thought if I died, the evidence died with me. Did it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm not that careless." Talia absorbed this, the implications swirling in her mind. "What happens to her now? Trial, prison, justice?" His eyes bored into hers, unwavering. "But first, I need to keep you alive. You're the only witness. Without your testimony, her lawyers will bury this." The weight of it settled on Talia's shoulders, crushing her. She wasn't just a witness. She was the key to everything. "I have a brother," she said quietly. "Marcus. He's in college. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you." Julian's voice was iron, a promise etched in steel. "I'm moving you both to a secure location. Full-time security. Whatever he needs for school, he gets. And when this is over, you choose what happens next." "Choose what?" "Your life. Your future. You don't owe me anything, Talia. But I owe you everything." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. A painful ache of empathy and something else. Something she couldn't quite name. This man, this dangerous, complicated man, was looking at her like she hung the moon. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered, the question escaping her lips before she could stop it. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching hers. When he spoke, his voice was raw, almost a whisper. "Because for 10 years, I've been surrounded by people who would watch me die if it benefited them. You're the first person in a decade who chose different, who saw me as human, not a monster or a meal ticket." Talia's breath caught in her throat. She saw past the tailored suit, the reputation, the carefully cultivated image of ruthless power. She saw a man who'd been alone in a crowd for far too long. "You're not a monster," she said softly, the words a heartfelt conviction. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Monsters don't say thank you. Monsters don't protect the people who help them. Monsters don't want out." Something broke in Julian's expression, a crack in the armor he'd worn for so long. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, as if unsure of her reaction. And when Talia didn't pull away, his hand covered hers, his touch warm and surprisingly gentle. "I will keep you safe," he promised, his voice a low rumble of unwavering resolve. "No matter what it costs me." And looking into his eyes, stormy, gray, and fierce, Talia believed him. The safe house was a penthouse in Tribeca, with bulletproof windows and guards disguised as doormen. Marcus arrived that evening, confused and terrified, until Talia explained everything, laying out the events of the past 24 hours in stark, terrifying detail. Her brother, tall, gangly, with the same warm brown skin and honest eyes, pulled her into a fierce hug, his relief palpable. "You could have died," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But I didn't. You're insane." "Maybe." Marco set them up in adjacent rooms, both luxurious in a way that made Talia deeply uncomfortable. There was a chef, a housekeeper, and enough security to guard a president. That night, Julian called her personal phone, the one Marco had given her that morning. "Are you settled?" Talia walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering city lights. "This is too much. It's barely enough." "Julian, you saved my life, Talia. Let me save yours." The gentleness in his voice undid something in her chest, a dam bursting after holding back a torrent of emotion. "Okay," she whispered. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start building the case." But before he hung up, he added, his voice softening, "And Talia, thank you for seeing me." She pressed her phone to her chest after he was gone, feeling like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying, a precipice overlooking an abyss. In the reflection of the window, she saw a woman who was no longer invisible, and she wasn't sure if that was a gift or a curse. Julian Ferrara was determined to protect Talia at any cost, but keeping her safe meant keeping her close. As they prepared to take down Victoria's empire, the line between protection and something deeper, something far more dangerous, began to blur. What happens when the most dangerous man in New York starts seeing his savior as something more than just a witness? 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo, a surreal blend of luxury and constant, underlying tension. Talia gave her statement to Julian's lawyers, a team of sharp-eyed professionals who treated her testimony like precious diamonds, meticulously safeguarding every detail. They prepped her for depositions, explained complex legal procedures, and assured her that Victoria's family was crumbling under the weight of the evidence Julian had been secretly collecting for years. But it was the evenings that changed everything subtly, inexorably. Julian visited every night. At first, Marco or another guard stayed in the room, a silent, watchful presence. But gradually, those chaperones disappeared, and they were left alone to navigate the uncharted territory that lay between them. They talked about everything and nothing. Talia's dreams of opening a community center in Brooklyn, a safe haven for kids in her old neighborhood. Julian's childhood in Naples before his family brought him to New York, a world of sun-drenched streets and close-knit bonds. The books they'd read, the music they loved, the things that made them, them. "You're different than I expected," Talia admitted one evening, the words slipping out before she could censor them. They were on the penthouse terrace, the city spread out below them like a carpet of stars. Julian stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar warm, a scent that both soothed and aroused. "Different how?" His voice was a low murmur, close to her ear. "Softer, more." She struggled for the word. "Human." A flicker of something akin to pain crossed his face. "That's because you're the only person who treats me like one." His voice dropped, becoming almost a confessional whisper. "Everyone else sees the boss, the killer, the empire. You see Julian." Talia turned to face him fully, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. His features were sculpted perfection. Strong jaw, full lips, eyes that held decades of pain and hidden depths she was only beginning to fathom. "Who is Julian?" "Someone who's tired," he admitted, his voice rough with honesty. "Someone who wants to build instead of destroy. Someone who—" He reached up, his fingers brushing against her cheek, tucking a stray curl behind her ear with infinite gentleness. "Someone who thinks about you far too much." Her breath caught in her throat, A sudden, sharp intake of air. Julian, I know it's complicated, dangerous, probably the worst idea I've ever had. His thumb traced her cheekbone, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine. But I can't stop. Talia should step back. Should remember that this man lived in a world of violence and power plays. A world where loyalty was a commodity and betrayal was a constant threat. Should protect her heart, build walls around it to keep it safe from the storm that raged around him. Instead, she leaned into his touch, closing the small space between them. I think about you too, she whispered, the confession trembling on her lips. The kiss that followed was inevitable, a culmination of weeks of unspoken desires and simmering tension. Gentle at first, a tentative exploration, then deeper, more demanding, as Julian's hands cradled her face like she was made of spun glass, a fragile treasure he was afraid of breaking. Talia's fingers curled into his shirt, anchoring herself to something solid, something real, in a world that had been spinning off its axis. When they broke apart, breathless and shaken, Julian rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. I can't promise you safe, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. I can't promise you easy, but I can promise that I will burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you. That's terrifying. I know, and strangely romantic. His laugh was surprised and genuine, a sound she hadn't heard often enough. Only you would find death threats romantic. Only you would mean them as love declarations. The word love hung between them, too big, too soon. But Talia saw the truth in Julian's eyes, a raw, unguarded emotion that mirrored her own. And she suspected he saw it in hers, too. The trial date was set for Monday. It was Thursday when everything went wrong, when the fragile piece they'd built shattered into a million pieces. Talia was in the penthouse library, trying to distract herself from the gnawing anxiety that had been building for days, when the lights cut out. The emergency backup kicked in immediately, bathing everything in a harsh, eerie red glow. And she heard Marco's voice over the intercom, calm and controlled, but with an undercurrent of urgency that sent a jolt of fear through her veins. Lockdown protocol. Stay where you are. Do not open your door to anyone unless you hear my voice. Her phone rang, the jarring sound slicing through the silence. It was Julian. Don't move, he said without preamble, his voice clipped and sharp. We have a breach. 3 men made it past the lobby. Talia's blood ran cold, turning to ice in her veins. Where are you? 5 minutes away. His voice was steel, edged with a barely suppressed fury. Talia, listen to me. There's a panic room behind the bookshelf. Second shelf from the top. Pull the blue book. Get inside and don't come out until I come for you. What about Marcus? He's already secured. Now move. Talia dropped the phone and ran, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her hands shook violently as she found the blue book, a fake, just a trigger, and pulled. The bookshelf swung open silently, revealing a small, windowless room with monitors, supplies, and reinforced walls. A safe haven. She was about to step inside when she heard it. A voice in the hallway, low and menacing. Not Marco. Not any of the guards she recognized. Search every room. The boss wants her alive. Victoria's people. Talia's mind raced, her thoughts a jumbled mess of fear and desperation. If she hid, they'd find Marcus. They would torture him to get to her. If she ran, maybe she could lead them away, buy him some time. It was stupid, reckless. Exactly what Julian had told her not to do. She did it anyway. Stepping out into the hallway, she made sure they saw her, their faces illuminated by the red emergency lights. Looking for me? 3 men spun around, their eyes widening in predatory glee. One of them grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellowed teeth. There you are. Talia ran, her sneakers pounding against the polished floor. She knew this penthouse now, every corner and corridor, every hidden passage and secret alcove. She led them through the living room, past the kitchen, buying time, her lungs burning with exertion. Behind her, she heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire, sharp and violent. Marco and the guards engaging, fighting to protect her. Chaos erupted, and Talia used it, weaving through the opulent rooms, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She made it to the master bedroom, the one Julian used when he stayed over, the room that held the lingering scent of his cologne and the imprint of his presence. There was a gun in the nightstand. She'd seen Marco check it, clean it, ensure it was always ready. Talia had never held a weapon in her life, but her hands moved on instinct, fueled by a desperate need to survive. Grabbing it, checking the safety the way she'd seen in movies, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar mechanism. When the first man crashed through the door, his face contorted in a snarl. She pointed the gun at him, her hand shaking but her gaze unwavering. "Don't," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You won't shoot. Try me." He did. He lunged forward, his hand reaching for her, and Talia squeezed the trigger. The gunshot was deafening, the force of it reverberating through her entire body. The man dropped, clutching his shoulder, his face a mask of pain and surprise. Talia's ears rang, her hands shook uncontrollably, but she kept the gun up as the other two burst into the room, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Drop it." One sneered, his hand tightening around his own weapon. "You drop yours." Julian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, cold and lethal. He stood in the doorway, flanked by a dozen men, their own weapons pointed with deadly precision. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene in a split second, landing on Talia, and she saw something fierce and feral flash across his face, a possessive rage that made her heart skip a beat. "Touch her," Julian said softly, his voice laced with a chilling promise, "and I will make your death's last days." The men lowered their guns, their bravado vanishing in the face of his chilling authority. They were smart enough to know he wasn't making an idle threat. Within minutes, they were detained, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. The penthouse was secured, the threat neutralized, and Julian was pulling Talia into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his body trembling with a mixture of relief and barely suppressed fury. "You were supposed to hide," he said into her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "They would have found Marcus. So you made yourself bait?" He pulled back, his hands framing her face, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did someone shoot you?" "He didn't give me a choice." Talia was starting to shake now, the adrenaline finally crashing. "Julian, you were magnificent." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, a series of frantic, desperate gestures. "Terrifying and reckless and magnificent. Never do that again." "Can't promise that, Julian. If protecting the people I love means taking risks, I'll take them." She met his eyes, her gaze unwavering. "That includes you." Julian went very still, his expression softening, transforming from a hardened warrior to a man utterly captivated. "You love me." It wasn't a question, but Talia answered anyway, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, I do. Stupid, right?" "No," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the smartest thing I've ever heard." He kissed her properly this time, deep and claiming, pouring all his relief, his gratitude, and his burgeoning love into the kiss. "I love you too. Have since the night you burst through those doors to save me." All around them, Marco was coordinating cleanup, barking orders into his phone. Guards were escorting prisoners out, their faces grim. But in this moment it was just them. Two people who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances, and decided to hold on no matter the cost. "The trial's in 4 days," Julian murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "After that, you're free. Free to leave, to go back to your life, to forget this ever happened." Talia cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the strong lines of his jaw. "What if I don't want to forget? Then I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that I can be the man you deserve. You already are." His laugh was shaky with relief and joy. "You see the best in me. I see the truth in you." Talia kissed him softly, a gentle promise of forever. "And the truth is, Julian Ferrara, you're not the monster you think you are. Maybe not anymore, he conceded, his voice rough with emotion. Not with you. He held her close, burying his face in her hair. Marcus appeared, escorted by guards, his face etched with concern. He threw his arms around Talia, hugging her fiercely. You're insane, he said, echoing his words from weeks ago. Runs in the family. Julian watched them with something tender in his expression. A longing for the simple connection, the unwavering loyalty, the things he'd been missing for so long. That night, after everything was secured and the adrenaline finally faded, Talia fell asleep in Julian's arms, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. And for the first time since this began, since she'd stepped into this dangerous world, she felt safe. Talia had just risked everything to protect the people she loved, including Julian, the man who had become her everything. But the trial was only days away, and Victoria's family wouldn't go down without a fight. As the final battle approached Julian and Talia, a scorned employee, a liar, someone seeking attention, right? Isn't it a fact, Miss Brooks, that you've been residing in Mr. Ferrara's penthouse for weeks now? A rather lavish perk for a disgruntled former staff member. Wouldn't you agree? The prosecuting attorney sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. For my protection, yes, and undeniably convenient, Talia retorted, refusing to be intimidated. Some might suggest, the lawyer pressed, his eyes glinting with predatory satisfaction, that you concocted this entire elaborate story, this fantastical tale of attempted murder, to endear yourself to a wealthy and powerful man. A classic gold digger scenario, wouldn't you say? Talia met the lawyer's gaze head-on, her voice ringing with unwavering conviction. Some might say that, but they'd be unequivocally wrong. I have no material proof, I grant you that. But I have something far more valuable, my word, and the unvarnished truth. She paused, letting her words resonate in the hushed courtroom. Victoria Ferrara tried to murder her husband, Marco Ferrara. I witnessed the act, and no amount of your expensive suits, your theatrical gestures, or your fancy legal jargon will ever alter that reality. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom, a wave of shock and disbelief washing over the spectators. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order amidst the rising tide of voices. As Talia stepped down from the stand, she caught Julian's eye. His gaze was intense, filled with a fierce pride that warmed her from the inside out. The trial stretched on for 3 grueling days. Expert witnesses testified about the insidious properties of the poison used, a rare and almost untraceable substance. Marco, betraying a lifetime of loyalty, presented damning evidence of Victoria's family connections to organized crime, revealing a dark and dangerous web of influence. But it was Julian's meticulously kept documentation, years of careful record-keeping and covert investigations, that truly painted a devastating picture of Victoria's motive and intent. Finally, Victoria took the stand in her own defense, attempting to spin a tale of a loveless and abusive marriage, portraying herself as a victim of a controlling husband who had threatened her very existence. But when the prosecuting attorney relentlessly questioned her, why she hadn't contacted the police, why she chose such an obscure and undetectable poison, and why she waited until Julian was in the process of drafting divorce papers, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Her story unraveled under the weight of the truth, revealing the cold and calculating woman beneath. The jury deliberated for 6 agonizing hours. Talia sat in a private room with Julian, their hands clasped tightly together, offering silent support. He was unusually quiet, his body radiating a palpable tension. This trial wasn't just about Victoria's guilt or innocence. It was about his future, his freedom, his chance to finally break free from the shackles of the life he had been born into. Whatever happens, Talia said softly, her voice filled with love and reassurance. We'll face it together. We're in this together, always. Julian brought her hand to his lips, his eyes filled with gratitude. Together, he echoed, his voice thick with emotion. When the verdict was finally delivered, it was swift and unequivocal. Guilty on all counts. The words reverberated through the courtroom, each syllable sealing Victoria's fate. Attempted murder, conspiracy, racketeering. The charges were read aloud, each one a nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed life. Victoria Ferrara was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, a sentence that reflected the gravity of her crimes. A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom, a tangible release of tension that had been building for weeks. Julian's shoulders visibly relaxed, and Talia saw something she had never witnessed before, tears glistening in his eyes. "It's over," she whispered, her voice filled with compassion. "It's finally over." "It's over," he agreed, pulling her close, burying his face in her hair. "And it's just beginning." Outside the courthouse, a chaotic swarm of reporters descended upon them, their microphones thrust forward, their questions overlapping in a cacophony of noise. Julian's legal team expertly managed the press, but one question managed to cut through the din, piercing the carefully constructed defenses. "Mr. Ferrara, what's next for you? What does the future hold?" Julian paused, his gaze softening as he looked down at Talia standing beside him. He squeezed her hand gently before addressing the crowd. "Redemption," he said simply, his voice clear and strong, "and building something worth protecting." That night, they returned to the penthouse, the opulent space feeling strangely empty and sterile after the emotional turmoil of the trial. Marco had thoughtfully prepared champagne to celebrate their victory, but Julian waved it away, preferring instead to stand on the terrace with Talia, gazing out at the glittering cityscape that they had both fought so hard to survive in. "I've made arrangements," Julian said, breaking the comfortable silence. "The businesses that I can't sell outright, I'm restructuring, divesting, severing ties. Going completely legitimate will take years, a monumental undertaking, but I've hired the best lawyers in New York, the most brilliant financial minds in the city." Talia turned to him, her brow furrowed with concern. "What about your enemies? The ones who won't be so easily bought or persuaded?" Julian shrugged, his expression hardening slightly. "Some will inevitably fall along with Victoria's family. As for the others, I've made peace with the ones I could, reached agreements, brokered deals, and I've eliminated the threats that I couldn't. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a start. A clean slate." Talia leaned into his warmth, resting her head against his shoulder. "What about us, Julian? What about our future?" He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her waist, his eyes filled with an intensity that took her breath away. "I love you, Talia, more than I ever thought possible. I want to build a life with you, a real life, filled with love and laughter and shared dreams. I want to fund that community center you've always dreamed about, the one that's closest to your heart. I want to watch your brother graduate, see him achieve his full potential. I want to wake up every morning and remember what it feels like to be human, to be connected, to be alive." He paused, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. "That's a lot of wanting, Julian Ferrara. Are you sure you're up to it?" He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that transformed his face. "I've spent the last 10 years wanting nothing but survival, existing in a world of darkness and fear. You taught me to want more, Talia. You opened my eyes to the possibility of a different kind of life." He kissed her forehead, his voice husky with emotion. "You taught me to want everything." Talia's eyes burned with happy tears, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "I love you too, Julian, even though you're bossy and overprotective and have terrible taste in ties." Julian chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Hey, my ties are impeccable. They're classic, timeless." "They're boring," Talia countered, playfully punching him on the arm. "But I'll let you pick them from now on, as a special concession, a gesture of goodwill." "Now that," Julian declared, his voice filled with mock solemnity, "is true love." They laughed, the sound echoing in the night air, a melody of freedom and hope. 2 weeks later, Julian made his final, audacious play. He arranged a clandestine meeting with the heads of the 5 families, the old guard who had controlled New York's underworld for generations, the puppet masters who had orchestrated the city's criminal symphony for decades. Talia desperately wanted to attend the meeting, to stand by his side, to offer him her unwavering support. But Julian adamantly refused. "This is my world to dismantle, Talia. My demons to face. I won't let you risk yourself again. Not for anything. Julian, please, let me be there for you. Let me help you." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes filled with love and determination. "Let me do this for you, for us, for the future we're building together. Trust me." So, Talia waited anxiously in the penthouse, Marcus keeping her company, his presence a comforting reassurance, while Julian faced his past one final time, venturing into the heart of darkness to secure their future. He returned 4 hours later, physically and emotionally exhausted, but undeniably triumphant. "They agreed," he said simply, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "I'm out. Completely. They'll absorb my territories, divide my assets, reshuffle the deck. And in exchange, they leave me and mine alone. Forever. No retaliation, no vendettas, no lingering shadows. They agreed to it." He paused, a flicker of grim satisfaction crossing his features. "I made it worth their while. I offered them a deal they couldn't refuse. And I reminded them, ever so subtly, that the evidence I possess, the secrets I know, could destroy them all if they ever reneged on our agreement. A little insurance policy just in case." He sank onto the couch, pulling Talia into his lap, holding her close. "It's done, Talia. It's finally done. I'm just Julian Ferrara now. Not a boss, not a criminal, not a man defined by his past. Just a man trying to do better. A man trying to be worthy of your love." Talia kissed him deeply, pouring all her love and relief and gratitude into the embrace. "That's all I ever wanted you to be, Julian. Just you." The community center opened 6 months later, a beacon of hope in a neglected corner of Brooklyn. Talia cut the ceremonial ribbon, her face radiant with joy, Marcus standing proudly by her side, his eyes brimming with tears of happiness. Julian hung back, content to watch from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride as he witnessed the culmination of their shared dream. The center, a vibrant and welcoming space, would offer after-school programs for children, job training for adults, and vital resources for families in need. Everything Talia had envisioned, made possible by a man who had dared to change, who had chosen love and redemption over the darkness of his past. That night, in their new home, a cozy brownstone in Brooklyn, far from the cold marble and opulent grandeur of the mansion, Julian proposed. There was no fancy restaurant, no elaborate decorations, no hired photographer to capture the moment. Just the two of them, standing in their living room, surrounded by the warmth and familiarity of their love. And a ring, a delicate antique that had once belonged to his mother, a symbol of hope and enduring love passed down through generations. "Marry me, Talia," he said simply, his voice filled with sincerity. "Not because I saved you, or because you saved me, but because we save each other every day, because we make each other better, because I can't imagine my life without you." Talia didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The kiss that followed tasted like new beginnings, like promises whispered in the dark, like a future filled with endless possibilities. The wedding was small and intimate, held in a picturesque garden upstate, surrounded by only the people who truly mattered to them. Marcus, his heart overflowing with emotion, walked Talia down the aisle, giving her away with tears in his eyes. Marco, his usual stern expression softened by genuine happiness, stood as Julian's best man, a silent testament to the enduring power of loyalty and friendship. As Julian and Talia exchanged vows, their voices filled with love and commitment, Talia couldn't help but think back to that fateful night, the night that had changed everything, the moment she had chosen not to walk away. She thought about the bravery she hadn't known she possessed, the unwavering faith that had guided her through the darkness. "I promise to see you, Julian," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not the monster you fear you are, but the man I know you're becoming, the man you truly are. I promise to stand beside you, to challenge you, to support you, to love you through every transformation, every step of the way." Julian's voice was steady but thick with emotion as he spoke his vows. I promise to protect you without caging you, to honor your strength while offering my own, to build a life worthy of the woman who saved me, in every way that matters. You are my light, my hope, my everything. They kissed as husband and wife, sealing their vows with a promise of eternal love. And in the applause and laughter that followed, Talia heard the future calling. Uncertain yet beautiful. A symphony of hope and possibility. A future that was entirely theirs to create. Later, at the reception, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, Julian pulled her close on the dance floor, his eyes filled with love and adoration. Any regrets, Mrs. Ferrara? Talia looked around at their chosen family, at Marcus laughing with Marco, at Dr. Chan chatting animatedly with Mrs. Chan, at friends from the community center mingling with Julian's newly legitimate business associates. Not a single one, she said, her voice filled with contentment. My only regret is that I didn't find you sooner. Julian smiled, his eyes sparkling with mischief. We found each other exactly when we needed to, Talia. Not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. Fate, perhaps, or maybe just two people brave enough to save each other. Julian spun her around, her laughter echoing in the air, her natural curls adorned with flowers, her skin glowing in the golden light. She was no longer the invisible maid, the forgotten shadow in the corner of the room. And Julian was no longer just the feared Mafia boss, the ruthless enforcer of a brutal underworld. They were simply Julian and Talia Ferrara, two souls intertwined, writing a new story, a story built on sacrifice, loyalty, protection, and revealed secrets that had ultimately set them both free. And as the sun set on their wedding day, painting the sky in vibrant shades of promise, they danced into their future together, hand in hand, their hearts filled with hope and love, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that as long as they had each other, anything was possible.